In August 1536, some 50,000 indigenous warriors marched on Lima, under the command of Manco Inca's most valiant general, Quiso Yupanqui. His orders? To drive Spanish conquistadores into the sea. For more than 470 years, all there was to know about the events of the six-day Siege of Lima had to be gleaned from an often contradictory historical record left by early colonial chroniclers. But now, from a barren, outlying foothill of the Peruvian capital, the fallen Inca warriors speak from shallow graves. For the first time, physical skeletal remains reveal the brutally violent historic transition from Inca imperial rule to the Spanish colonial era. An international team of scientists, led by Peruvian archaeologist Guillermo Cock, has uncovered the remains of 35 apparent Inca casualties from the epic uprising. Among them, men, women, and adolescents, and a forensically proven case of the first gunshot victim ever found from the Conquest era.
The first time in the Americas that we have evidence of people being killed, native people that being killed by firearms and during the conquest. Also, it's the first time that we have evidence that people that have been killed with swords and with maces and European weapons in general.
Cock, who has spent the last quarter century trying to unravel the mystery of the Inca Empire and its demise, was asked by the city of Lima in 2004 to excavate the site. They wanted to ensure no valuable archaeological remains would be destroyed by a proposed road project. In the 20 by 80 foot excavation pit they dug, Cock and longtime archaeologist colleague Elena Goicoechea quickly discovered the site had been a cemetery dating back to the Inca civilization. The cemetery lies less than a half-mile from thousands of Inca mummy bundles discovered in 1999 by Cock at another dig, Puruchuco Huaquerones. That site had offered some of the clearest and most complete evidence ever found of everyday life during the Inca's reign from 1438 to 1532, when the Spanish arrived. But in this newer site, there were puzzling differences. Cock found that 72 of the bodies were buried without the usual Inca reverence for death. They had not been ritually wrapped in yards of raw cotton and entombed with funerary offerings. They had not been buried in a flexed, seated position, with the knees pulled up to the chin, and they were not facing towards the northeast, and they were buried less than a foot from the surface.
Everything suggests that they have been buried in a hurry. Very soon we realized that the only event that we could associate these remains with was not the Siege of Lima in 1536 during the months of July and August. That was related to the great rebellion of Manco Inca that isolated Cusco and also isolated Lima. And almost exterminate and almost push the Spaniards into the sea.
It is the discovery of the gunshot victim, however, that has caused the most excitement. When he first spotted the partially excavated skeleton, face down, with a hole through the head, Cock initially attributed it to vandals firing handguns into the ground, but quickly realized that the velocity and force of a modern bullet would have shattered the skull.
Then we were confronted with the possibility that we were in front of somebody that had been shot, had been killed by a firearm on the verge of the conquest.
Team member and bioarchaeologist Melissa Murphy.
I did double take because for a minute because I thought we're not supposed to see gunshot trauma in the sample, and there's not supposed to be gunshot wounds. And then when I took it out and started examining it with one of my Peruvian students, and I was able to kind of reconstruct part of the face, and I could clearly see where the projectile had exited. And when I took photographs of the entrance, it has the characteristics of a classic gunshot wound. I just thought, whoa, no. And I was pretty blown away, and I had to keep reassuring myself, no, it's a gunshot wound, it's a gunshot wound. And then
Scientists from New Haven's Henry C. Lee Institute of Forensic Science in Connecticut scanned the skull with an electronic microscope. They found the wound was impregnated with fragments of iron, a metal unknown in pre-Hispanic Peru, but one that was sometimes used by the Spanish to make musket balls. National Geographic, which has helped fund Cock's research, announced the breakthrough bullet discovery on June 20th.
The projectile is entering the skull here and then exiting probably at the frontal, which is this forehead part, that's the bone that makes up your forehead, and also probably through the face. And all the face is very fragmentary. I didn't take those bones out, but they have all come apart. And what you can see kind of around the edges here is some beveling that you see with projectile exit wounds. So if you were to look onto the interior of the cranium to the inside of that gunshot wound, it actually has an internal bevel. So, and we know that these characteristics are things that you see in modern forensic cases of gunshot victims.
The Great Inca Rebellion of 1536 began when Manco Inca, the conquistadores' puppet ruler, grew tired of abuses by his Spanish masters. Behind the Spaniards' backs, he met in secret with his generals to plan a huge mobilization of Inca warriors to kill the Spanish and forever drive the European invaders from his devastated land.
The Inca forces that were fleeing the siege actually took both a northerly and a southerly route, and the southerly route, those forces fled very close to Puruchuca-Huacarones. So some of these people could have been victims who were fighting alongside the Incas against the Spanish. Some of them could also have been kind of collateral damage, that is, unfortunate victims who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when the Spanish were chasing down the Inca troops. And hopefully with future research we'll be able to answer those questions with more precision.
At the time of the Siege of Lima, the area where the cemetery is located was known as Lati. 80 years after the battle, Inca chronicler Felipe Juan Poma de Ayala identified a nearby canal as a site where the Inca general Quiso Yupanqui died under the lance of a Spanish conquistador. Cock and his team believe the Inca battle cemetery sheds light on how Francisco Pizarro deftly forged alliances with native tribes that viewed the Inca as a common enemy. Most of the empire's populace had fallen under Inca control during a lightning-fast rise that spanned only 3 or 4 generations. The Inca skeletons bear battle scars inflicted by the Spanish and their indigenous allies.
We have a mix of injuries. So there are some individuals who have injuries that were stained from Spanish or European weapons, and they're clearly European or Spanish weapons. And then there's some individuals that have injuries that were sustained from indigenous weapons, so star-shaped maces or perhaps some type of wooden axes or bola stones or sling stones. It's likely that the Spanish were probably supplemented by indigenous forces both from South America, or Peru, and also from perhaps Mesoamerica, who'd been kind of recruited and forced to accompany the Spaniards when they came into Peru. There's this myth perpetuated that there's 147 Spaniards and they conquered thousands of indigenous armies. Well, we know that there are people who are very resentful of being under Inca control. So when the Spanish arrived, they perceived them, the Spaniards, as being liberators.